Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a viewer ask a question, and he asked me, hey, what do you think about Peter Sisco's power factor training? Man, I forgot about that until the guy asked the question. I've actually run this program. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, I don't even remember what year I ran this program, but I'll talk to you guys a little bit about this. And this is going to be a little bit of a story of me not knowing what I'm doing, of me being gullible, of me falling for something because it sounded really good when I was much younger. And you know what? So when I say a lot of these things, I'm not some guru who's talking down to everyone as if I've always known everything my whole life. No, guys, I was young. I've been in my early 20s in training, mid-20s in training and everything else, just like a lot of the people out there. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I did some really, really stupid shit. And this is a perfect example. And you know what? I saw this book. Someone else had said, hey, have you read this? It looks really good. And it was really popular. A bunch of people were running it. They had bought this book because you could buy it everywhere at actual bookstores and stuff. And I actually used to go to bookstores back then and had much of my life. And I saw it sitting right there, and I grabbed the book. It was like Walden Books or something in the mall. I bought this book. I read the entire book cover to cover. Then I went and showed it to a friend of mine who was training for kickboxing, who also lifted weights, who competed in kickboxing. He said, wow, this looks really good. I mean, this is really scientific. And we both went and ran the program separately. And here's how he ropes you in with it. Essentially, this book starts out with a premise that your muscles grow as a result of workload, and he actually he might have discussed the Milo of Croton thing. I don't know if he did or not, because everyone does who understands progressive overload. But Peter Sisco and I believe John Little helped him write the book. They were big believers in Mike Minzer's HIIT. But they wanted to approach something very, very scientific. And they realized that the best way to make muscles grow was through sheer workload. All right? And they defined workload as tonnage. How much weight can you move? How much weight can you move? That was the basis of what they were doing. And so what they would have you do is they broke down some formulas and had you be able to examine to figure out how much weight to use on an exercise because of how much total tonnage you could do. And then, rather than just total workload, because obviously really light weights would work best, because they said, heavy weight mattered. It's about how much weight you can move for so many reps. And how much tonnage you could do. Then they said, okay, but there's more to it than that, because otherwise everyone would just do endless amounts of volume. They're like, so what about workload density? Meaning, let's say you wanted to give yourself so much workload per unit of time. So that's what they had you do, is do everything with stopwatches, so that you could they had like a power factor, and then they had like a time-based power factor. All right, to where you would measure everything down to the second of your workout. So you would run a timer, you knew how long your total workout was, so that you would be able to write all this down. So you timed your reps, or your time of your actual sets, your rest between sets, the time of your total workout, so that you could actually calculate your power factors for each exercise and your power factor for your whole body, and then base it on how many minutes it took you to do all of it. So they had a whole component for workload density. How much work can you do per minute of time you spend in the gym? And this sounded really scientific, and they're like, as long as your power factor is going up, or your power factor, the I, or whatever they have by it for time being involved, is increasing, then you're going to gain muscle. You're going to gain a lot of muscle. And this is the ultimate way to train, because you can scientifically track all of your workloads, workload density, everything. But then here's where they get you. This is where it gets funny. This is where it gets interesting, because they suck you in with this very scientific, mathematical approach to training, because Mike Minzer believed in that sort of concept. Maximizing growth response and being as scientific about it as possible. The problem is that they didn't base it on science, they based it on logic. Just like Mike Minzer did, because he used to take the works of philosophers and apply them to training. He was big on Ayn Rand. And so they didn't have a scientific approach. They called it that, but what it really was a logical and mathematical approach, because, even logic is mathematically based. And so this wasn't based upon research, it was based upon reasoning. And it sounded amazingly logical. So what they do next, now that they've got you suckered in with this logic and math, then here's the kicker. Range of motion doesn't matter, because all that matters is workload done. And even if you have leverages changed and everything else, the muscles are still doing the work. So technically, if you were to do 5 2-inch long reps with 500 pounds, you're getting the equivalent work of if you had done a single 10-inch rep with 500 pounds, because it's still moving 500 pounds for 10 inches. And that's still work done. We could measure that. That is work done. If you don't know how far the weight's going, it's hard to measure, but it really is about how much work you do in terms of moving a weight a given distance. And it's the same work done to do it 2 inches 5 times and 1 time for 10 inches. And so they start having you do strong range of motion lifts. Like you get into your strongest 3 to 4 inches on your range of motion, and you do everything there because you can do the most work. You can have the highest power factor by doing that. And so you might end up doing 30 or 40 reps on a set just through the strongest 2 to 4 inches of your range of motion. So they have you doing Hammersmith machines where you just do the bottoms, Smith machines, rack lockouts. And man, I did this whole thing. I bought into their stuff, hook, line, and sinker. All right. And I feel really silly about it, but I did. And so I ran their program, and man, I got to where, because, I was benching probably right around 370, 375 at the time I started this program. Started messing with it. I had pretty good lifts. Well, so what I started doing was doing their machine stuff, but I also did all this stuff in racks. So I got to where I was close gripping, because that's what I usually close gripped anyways. I got to where instead of my 375 max bench, I got to where I was close gripping like 585. Just the lockouts for 30 reps and stuff. Just doing the last 3 inches of the range of motion. Like I had to wrap my wrist and everything up to do it. And I was repping out 585 on just the lockout off the pins. I mean, it was hilarious. I did all their stuff. I went in and I started doing the leg press, with people sitting on top and just limiting the range of motion on the pins. Same thing, I did squats. I was doing like 700-pound squat lockouts for reps. And I did all this stuff the way that they called for it. I even did deadlifts this way with above the knee rack lockouts, having to wear straps because I couldn't hold, 700 pounds without straps at the time. I think at the time my max deadlift was, 550-ish. And so I did all this stuff. And here's the ironic part. I was on gear. I was doing a cycle of gear when I started their program. All right. All my power factors went up massively. And I want to say I was running something like 200 milligrams of testosterone with 500 or 600 milligrams of Boldenon every week. I pretty sure I gained muscle. I looked bigger. So I was gaining muscle from it. All my power factors went up, and I ran this program for 30 days. And my numbers on all their stuff, my strong range partials went up enormously. Like, for example, the closed grip bench press, I went from where my first day doing it, I could only do like 5 reps with 455 on the lockout, right? By the time I was 30 days into the program, I was so used to doing these strong range lockouts in the rack that I was doing 585 for like sets of 15 on the lockouts and doing like 2 or 3 sets of them. Right, from doing 455 to 585 through that same partial range of motion. And I used to get so fucking sore from it. God, did I get sore. But all my lifts went up. I mean, all these lifts, I went from like being able to do 5 to 10 reps on certain exercises through these ranges of motion to doing 100 or more pounds for 3 times the reps. Like adding 100 pounds and tripling the reps is what I was doing 30 days in. All right, and this is all well and good until I dropped their program. And I tried it for 30 days, and I'm like, I don't know if this is really working. So I went to test it, because they're like, well, if you do this, you're going to get stronger and everything, because muscle is still size, it's still strength. You're going to get stronger all the way around. But, ignore specificity of training. So I went back to try to bench press. And keep in mind, my max was about 370, 375, right? And I started ramping my sets up. And when I got up to like 325, I could barely do it for 1 rep. And then I tried to go higher. I went up to like 335, and I got pinned under that shit. All right, this is after only running their program for 30 days. I lost like 40 pounds off my bench press. My squat, I lost like 50 pounds off my max squat. And even my rep work on some of my accessories, when I went back to doing on full range of motion, I couldn't do the same weights and reps that I had done 30 days before. All right. And I went on gear like 2 weeks before. I started a cycle of gear 2 weeks before I started their program. And I was still on it and I lost strength. All right. I lost strength. So what does that tell you about this program? That it doesn't work. But that's the thing, that is the unfortunate thing that you see in this industry. If someone can sound logical and scientific, and you know what, this gets thrown at me. I'm not going to lie. This is a criticism people try to make of me. Well, you sound logical, you sound reasonable, but you spout bullshit until people actually go do all of it, and then they find, oh, well, this works. And what they actually find is that I'm not even making this stuff up myself. All right? I read and research a lot. Most of the material that I give you guys as far as training styles and training methods have been utilized by champions, have been utilized by coaches successfully. A lot of the stuff that I recommend is just stuff from previous eras before this whole online industry kind of changed training. Before Joe Weider changed training, I actually just promote a lot of the stuff that was extremely successful through the 60s and 70s. I also add in stuff that, the Russian researchers found, exercise science. And I add in stuff that modern exercise science has learned. Stuff that different coaches use around the world to train champions in a variety of sports. That's what I try to teach. It's not actually my own theories. And people do need to understand that. I mean, most of what I teach on this channel is not original material. It is large amounts of research that I do reading what different experts do with their athletes and have done. I go back and read stuff all the way back from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and look how different people were trained to get bigger, to get stronger, how training has evolved over the years. That's actually where I get my material. I read fast. I have a good memory. So yeah, I research a lot. So I'm not some amazing creative genius with what I teach. I use other people's material. And so the difference is that I am using stuff and I'm teaching stuff basically that is proven to work. A lot of these things like this were experimental, hypothetical training programs that people came up with who don't have a background in training athletes. These were not exercise science experts. These were not top coaches. These were guys who took Mike Minzer's philosophies and decided to run with it, and then took a concept that was very logical and took it to the most extreme possible conclusion and turned it into a training system. And it turns out it was a complete failure. It was a complete failure. They sold a lot of books. I mean, when major bookstores like Walden and Barnes and Nobles had their books sitting on the shelf, they're selling books. And a lot of people, something like 15 to 20 years ago, bought this book. A lot of people tried this stuff. And then after that, they put out another one called Static Contraction Training, to where they realized no range of motion was best. They went from strong range partials to just holding heavy weights statically. And again, they sold a lot of books. I had a copy of that book sitting on the shelf too, just to read it at one time. So you've got to watch that stuff out there, guys. You've got to watch that stuff. It's easy to get fooled with nonsense, and it's a lot easier to get fooled with nonsense when it's either presented extremely logically, but it hasn't been tried with top athletes, or when it's basically juice monkeys or people just promoting ideas and then they use their physiques as evidence. So it is really easy to get suckered in, guys, and we've all been there. And I kind of wanted to share this story of this program to show you guys that, you know what, I've been suckered into some of these cons myself. I've been suckered into these cons. I dedicated an entire month of training to this training system and performed it flawlessly and made amazing results according to their mathematics. But then in the real world, it turned out I had actually regressed. And that's oftentimes what happens with these different training systems. But the point is, it's very easy to get suckered into stuff. And just be careful what you listen to. Be careful what you do. And I'm not saying don't try things and experiment with things, because you might find something amazing. But it is important to really look at where this material is coming from and to really get a better understanding of it. And that's something that comes with time. And I mean, all of us, if you've been training long enough, all the older guys know this, you're going to get scammed every now and then. It's going to happen. Just be aware of it. And I'm no different. I was scammed myself. This system was one of those that got me. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.